My name is Lena, and I have always preferred the company of ghosts, not the spectral, chain-rattling kind, but the quiet ink and paper ghosts of history. My sanctuary is the city archive, a hushed, hallowed space that smells of decaying paper, old leather, and the faint, sweet scent of truth. I am a genealogist, and my passion is to breathe life back into forgotten names, to trace the intricate, invisible threads that connect the present to the past. This passion, however, is a source of constant, polite embarrassment for my family, the Vances. To the outside world, my family is the picture of old money elegance. They live in a grand, sterile mansion where the laughter is always a little too loud and the crystal glasses are always polished to a blinding shine. Their world is one of charity galas, society pages, and a relentless, desperate obsession with social status. My world of dusty records and faded handwriting is, to them, a deeply inconvenient and rather nerdy hobby. Still playing with dusty old papers, Lena? My sister, Beatrice, would ask, her voice a silken dagger of condescension, before launching into a story about her latest polo match. Beatrice is chairing another charity auction, my mother would say at dinner. You should learn from her, dear. It's all about building the right connections. They saw my life's work not as a noble pursuit of truth, but as a failure to participate in their shallow, glittering reality. I was the family footnote, the quiet, odd historian in a lineage that only cared about the future, or rather, a very specific, carefully curated version of the past, the object of their current, all-consuming obsession was a fortress of social exclusivity known as the Founders Legacy Society. Membership was the ultimate prize in our city's social hierarchy, a validation that one was not just wealthy, but historically significant. And there was only one way in, to provide irrefutable, documented proof of a direct lineage to one of the city's original founders. For my family, the target was a man named Silas Thorne, an ancestor whose name was whispered with a reverence usually reserved for saints. For 6 months, they had poured a small fortune into hiring the most expensive genealogical firms in the country, and for 6 months, they had failed. Each firm hit the same brick wall, a gap in the records in the late 1800s that no one could bridge. The frustration in our house was a palpable, toxic cloud. I would listen to them complain at dinner, their voices filled with the anguish of the truly privileged. It's humiliating, Beatrice had wailed one night after the third firm admitted defeat. The Weatherbys got in last year, and their ancestor was a candle maker. Silas Thorne practically built the city, and were being shut out. Their desperation was not about history, it was about status. The society was the one door they couldn't open with money, and it was driving them insane. They had exhausted all their expensive options, and now only one remained. The quiet, nerdy daughter who actually knew what she was doing. The plea came as I expected, cloaked in a performance of stunningly insincere praise. They set me down in the formal living room, a room I had rarely entered, and suddenly, after years of mockery, I was their last and greatest hope. Lena, darling, my mother began, her voice oozing a warmth that was utterly foreign. We've been so foolish, wasting all this money on so-called professionals when our own brilliant daughter is the real expert. My father nodded gravely. You have a gift for this, Lena, a real, unique talent. If anyone can find this link to Silas Thorne, it's you. Beatrice, in her most stunning act of theater, actually took my hand, her eyes wide with feigned admiration. I was always so impressed by your dedication, Lena. I didn't understand it, but I do now. Please, she squeezed my hand, will you do this for us? For the family? Then came the promise, the one they were sure would seal the deal. If you can do this, my father said, his voice low and serious, everything will change. You will have your place of honor in this family. We will hold a celebration, and I will stand up in front of everyone and tell them that it was your genius, and yours alone, that secured our legacy. My mind, the logical, analytical part of me, saw right through the transparent manipulation. But there was another, smaller, more wounded part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime craving a single crumb of their approval that was tempted. And beyond that, there was the pure, irresistible allure of the historical puzzle itself. So, I agreed. For the next 3 weeks, I lived in the city archives. The quiet, dusty rows of records became my home. I spent my days hunched over massive, brittle ledgers, my fingers, clad in white cotton gloves, tracing the faint, spidery script of a bygone era. I cross-referenced old land deeds with church baptismal records. I sifted through forgotten census data and shipping manifests. I was in my element, a detective hunting a ghost through a labyrinth of paper and time. The professional firms had been looking in all the obvious places. I started looking in the overlooked ones. I found our family name, misspelled, in the witness log of an 1888 property dispute. That led me to a different county's records, which led me to a previously unknown second marriage of a distant great-uncle. And there, in the faded ink of a dusty marriage certificate from a small, forgotten church, I found it. The missing link. The document that irrefutably connected our family line directly to Silas Thorne. I felt a surge of pure academic triumph. I had done it. I had solved the puzzle that had stumped the best in the business. In that moment, the victory was mine alone, a quiet, perfect moment of discovery. I took a high-resolution photograph of the document with my phone, my heart pounding with a quiet, nerdy joy that my family would never be able to comprehend. As I was carefully packing my research materials, ready to leave, the old archivist, a kind, scholarly man named Mr. Abernathy, shuffled over to my table. "Find what you were looking for, Miss Vance?" he asked with a gentle smile. "I did," I said, beaming. "The final link to Silas Thorne." Mr. Abernathy's smile faltered for a second. "Silas Thorne," he mused. "Funny, that name came up just yesterday." We finally unsealed the 19th century municipal court dockets. He was a very busy man, it seems. My curiosity, the true engine of any historian, was immediately piqued. "Court dockets?" I asked. "Are they available to view?" He led me to a small, climate-controlled room where a series of heavy, leather-bound volumes were laid out. I opened the one for 1890, and there it was. The other side of the story. The truth. Silas Thorne wasn't just a founder. He was a monster. The dockets were filled with fraud indictments, lawsuits from widows he had swindled out of their land, and sworn testimonies detailing his use of violence and intimidation to build his fortune. The noble founder was a ruthless, predatory criminal. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was the man my family was desperate to claim as their legacy. I spent the next 2 hours meticulously photographing every single page with my phone. The newspaper clippings detailing his scams, the signed confessions from his associates, the judge's final damning verdict. When I finally walked out of the archives and into the bright afternoon sun, I held 2 pieces of history in my hands. In one, the key to my family's greatest ambition, and in the other, the key to their utter destruction. I returned home from the archives with the 2 histories of Silas Thorne nestled in my bag, the one my family desperately wanted, and the one they would do anything to keep buried. I called a family meeting that evening. I presented them with my findings, laying out the clear, irrefutable proof of our lineage, the faded marriage certificate that was the key to their social ascension. Their reaction was not one of gratitude, but of pure, unadulterated triumph. My father snatched the document from my hand, his eyes gleaming with a greedy light I knew all too well. "You've done it, Lena," he exclaimed, clapping my brother, Beatrice, on the back as if she had been the one to succeed. "We're in." My mother was already on her phone, presumably calling her society friends. "This is wonderful work, dear," she said to me, her attention already elsewhere. "Truly. Now, we'll handle the formal submission to the society ourselves. These things require a certain finesse." The message was unmistakable. My part was over. I was the hired help, the nerdy little researcher who had served her purpose and was now to be dismissed. They didn't ask about my process, They didn't celebrate my skill, they didn't thank me. They simply took my work and claimed it as their own. I watched them, a cold, heavy certainty settling in my gut. I had known this was coming, but the speed and shamelessness of their betrayal still managed to sting. They hadn't just taken a document, they had taken my victory. I learned of their acceptance into the Founders Legacy Society not from a proud phone call from my parents, but from an online society column a week later. There was a picture of my parents and Beatrice beaming. Under the headline, Van's family to join the ranks of the city's elite, the article, written in a gushing, laudatory tone, spoke of their impeccable historical standing and their deep commitment to preserving the city's grand legacy. It quoted my mother extensively about the years of dedicated research the family had undertaken. There was, of course, no mention of my name. It was a complete and total erasure. I was a ghost in my own discovery. The silence from my family was deafening. They didn't call to share the news, to thank me, or even to acknowledge the pivotal role I had played. They were already living in their new reality, a reality built on my work but with no room for me in it. The silence was a clear and deliberate message. I was the embarrassing, dusty secret behind their polished new image, a secret they intended to keep buried. The irony was suffocating. I, the family historian, was the one person they wanted to erase from their history. The quiet satisfaction I had felt in the archives now felt like a naive dream. This wasn't about history or truth. It was about them. It had always been about them. The official celebration party was, by all accounts, the social event of the season. My invitation arrived in a plain white envelope, a stark contrast to the ornate, calligraphed invitations I knew the other guests had received. It was a clear signal of my status, a reluctant obligation. I attended, driven by a morbid curiosity and the cold, hard plan that was now taking shape in my mind. The family mansion was glittering, overflowing with the city's most powerful and influential people, all members of the society. My family greeted me at the door with the same polite, distant warmth they would offer a caterer. "Lena, so glad you could make it," my mother said, before immediately turning her attention to a wealthier, more important guest. I spent the first hour as a wallflower, watching them bask in their stolen glory. The centerpiece of the evening was the speeches. My father spoke of their noble ancestor and their family's unwavering dedication to the city's founding principles. Then, my mother took the stage, a champagne flute in her hand. She gave a toast, her voice ringing with performative pride. "And I must give a special, heartfelt thanks," she said, her eyes finding Beatrice in the crowd, "to my wonderful daughter, Beatrice. Her deep passion for our family's grand history, her tireless enthusiasm, was the true driving force behind this wonderful discovery. This is your victory, my darling." The crowd applauded politely. Beatrice blushed, accepting the unearned praise with a demure little smile. It was the most audacious, most public lie I had ever witnessed. She had given the credit for my painstaking work, my intellectual triumph, to my sister, who couldn't tell the difference between a census record and a dinner menu. And in that moment, any lingering flicker of familial loyalty I might have felt was extinguished forever. I did not cause a scene. I did not protest. I simply watched from the back of the room, a faint, unreadable smile on my face. My anger was no longer a hot, emotional thing. It had cooled into a calm, strategic resolve. This public insult was not a setback. It was a gift. It was the final piece of moral justification I needed to execute my plan. My focus shifted from my family to a single, important guest. I saw him standing near the fireplace, a stern, elderly man with an air of immense authority. It was Mr. Alistair Davenport, the president of the Founders Legacy Society. He was a retired history professor, a man known throughout the city for his almost fanatical devotion to historical accuracy and integrity. He was the one man in the room whose opinion mattered more than all the others combined. I watched as my parents and Beatrice made their way over to him, fawning and flattering, laughing at his dry jokes. He was their ultimate prize, the gatekeeper to the world they so desperately wanted to inhabit. He was also their executioner. He just didn't know it yet. My plan was no longer just to expose my family. It was to use the society's own most cherished values, truth, history, and integrity as the weapon to do it. They wanted a legacy? I was going to give them the real one. I went home that night and began my final preparations. The anger was gone, replaced by the quiet, methodical focus of a historian preparing an exhibit. I took the high-resolution photographs I had taken of the court dockets and the 19th-century newspaper articles. I printed them on heavy, archival-quality paper. I organized them chronologically, creating a damning, undeniable narrative of Silas Thorne's criminal career. The fraud indictments, the sworn testimonies from his victims, the newspaper headline, Thorne swindles widow's inheritance. City founder accused of vast land fraud. It was a story not of a noble founder, but of a ruthless predator. I placed these documents into a slim, elegant, leather-bound portfolio. On the front, in simple gold leaf, I had a single word embossed. Appendix. It looked like a beautiful, thoughtful gift, a supplement to the family's historical record. It was, in fact, a time bomb. My invitation to the Society's official induction ceremony, to be held the following week at their historic clubhouse, sat on my desk. It was the perfect stage, a room full of people who prided themselves on their connection to history. I was about to present them with a piece of history they had conveniently overlooked. My family thought they had successfully curated their past. They had no idea that I, the quiet family historian, was about to become the curator of their public destruction. The induction ceremony was held at the Founders Legacy Society's historic clubhouse, a place that felt less like a building and more like a temple to old money and ancestral pride. The air was thick with the scent of lemon oil, old books, and the quiet, suffocating weight of tradition. The walls were covered with stern, oil-painted portraits of the city's founders, their dead eyes seeming to judge everyone who walked beneath them. It was a world of hushed tones and subtle power dynamics, a place where your last name was your entire resume. My family moved through the room as if they were born to it, though they had only just been granted entry. My father was holding court with a city councilman, my mother was laughing with the wives of banking executives, and Beatrice was effortlessly charming a group of young heirs. They were basking in the warm, validating glow of their acceptance, completely at home in their new, stolen legacy. I, on the other hand, was an alien, a quiet observer in a simple, elegant dress, holding my leather-bound portfolio like a prayer book. I was not there to celebrate. I was there to officiate a funeral, the death of my family's social ambitions. The formal part of the evening began with a series of speeches. Mr. Alastair Davenport, the Society's president, a formidable man in his late 70s, spoke at length about the importance of legacy, of history, and of the unwavering moral character of the city's founding families. His words were a perfect, unintentional setup for the drama to come. Then, he invited my father to the stage to accept the family's official membership plaque and to say a few words. My father, puffed up with a pride he had not earned, took the podium. His speech was a nauseating performance of false modesty and historical revisionism. He spoke of his great-great-grandfather, Silas Thorne, a man of vision and integrity, a pillar of this community. He talked about the solemn duty of the Vance family to uphold that noble legacy. He even had the audacity to say, "We believe that truth and history are the most valuable heirlooms a family can possess." As he spoke, I felt a strange sense of calm. He was not just telling lies. He was building his own gallows, and I was holding the rope. The crowd applauded politely, completely captivated by the fiction. My mother and Beatrice, in the front row, looked up at him with tears of pride in their eyes. They were so lost in their own performance that they had no idea the curtain was about to fall. Mr. Davenport stepped back up to the podium, holding a heavy, ornate bronze plaque engraved with the Thorne family crest and our name. "And so," he said, his voice booming through the quiet hall. "It is with great pleasure that I officially welcome the Vance family into the Founders Legacy Society." He turned to hand the plaque to my father. This was the moment. I stood up from my seat in the third row. "Mr. Davenport," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the polite applause. "Before you do that, I have a small gift for the Society's archives." A confused murmur went through the room. My family on stage froze, their smiles faltering as they saw me approaching. My mother shot me a look of pure venom, a silent command to sit down and stop embarrassing them. I ignored her. All eyes were on me as I walked to the stage, my portfolio held in front of me. "I believe the historical record of the Thorne family is incomplete," I continued, my voice never wavering as I ascended the small steps. "I would like to make a contribution to ensure the full story is preserved." Mr. Davenport, a man who valued history above all else, looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and deep curiosity. He hesitated, then gestured for me to approach. I walked past my stunned, furious family and placed the portfolio, with its single embossed word appendix, on the podium in front of him. Mr. Davenport, his brow furrowed in confusion, opened the portfolio. I had placed the most damning document on top, a high-quality copy of the 19th century newspaper article, its headline stark and clear even from a distance. "Thorne swindles widow's inheritance. City founder accused of vast land fraud." I watched his eyes scan the first few lines. The polite, professional mask he wore dropped, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. His face, which had been a healthy pink, began to pale. He flipped the page. The next document was a copy of a signed court indictment for fraud against Silas Thorne. He flipped again. A sworn testimony from one of his victims. Again, a confession from an accomplice. A horrified silence began to spread from the stage outwards as the members closest to the podium craned their necks to see the documents, their own expressions mirroring their president's. My family, still on stage, could see the headlines upside down. Beatrice's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face went from red with anger to a ghastly, ashen gray. He finally understood what I had done. He had asked for a legacy, and I had just handed him the real one, a legacy not of honor, but of crime, corruption, and cruelty. The room was now completely silent, the only sound the soft rustle of paper as Mr. Davenport flipped through the final, damning pages of my research.mr. Davenport closed the portfolio with a soft, final thud. He stood up straight, his back rigid with an old-world fury. He did not look at me. He looked directly at my father, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. The microphone was still on, broadcasting his every word to the stunned, silent room. "Mr. Vance," he began, and his voice was no longer the warm, welcoming tone of a society president, but the cold, cutting voice of a judge delivering a sentence. "It seems your family's celebrated research was not just incomplete. It was a deliberate and offensive deception." He picked up one of the court documents from the portfolio and held it up for everyone to see. "This society is built on the bedrock of historical truth, not on convenient, sanitized fictions designed to elevate the unworthy." He then turned his withering gaze to the entire room. "According to these official, and quite frankly disgusting records, Silas Thorne was not a pillar of this community. He was a predator, a charlatan who built his fortune on the suffering of the very people the city was meant to serve." He dropped the paper back onto the podium. "The Founders Legacy Society hereby revokes the Vance family's membership, effective immediately. We do not honor criminals," he said, his voice booming. "Nor do we welcome their descendants who so brazenly lie about their history." He then turned to me, and for the first time, his expression softened into one of profound respect. "We do, however, honor truth-tellers. Thank you, Miss Vance, for your unwavering commitment to the integrity of the historical record. You have done this society and the history of this city a great service tonight." And he began to applaud, not for my family, but for me. The applause started slowly, hesitantly, and then grew, a wave of validation washing over me as I stood there, watching my family's social world burn to the ground. I didn't stay to watch the aftermath. I walked out of the Founders Legacy Society clubhouse and into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of my family's reputation behind me. I didn't feel the ecstatic thrill of victory I might have expected. Instead, I felt a strange, profound sense of quiet. It was the quiet of a story that had finally been told correctly, of a historical record that had been set straight. The explosion, however, was deafening even from a distance. The next morning, the scandal was the only thing anyone in the city was talking about. The same society columns that had celebrated my family's ascent were now documenting their spectacular fall from grace in gleeful, forensic detail. The story was irresistible. The old money family with a criminal founder, exposed by their own quiet, scholarly daughter in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. My family, who had built their entire identity on a foundation of social standing and public perception, had become pariahs overnight. They were a joke, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties and charity luncheons. Their most prized possession, their reputation, had been utterly and irrevocably destroyed. And I was the one who had set the fire. The consequences were not legal or financial, but in their world, they were far worse. It was a social death. My father, whose business deals relied heavily on his reputation and his connections within the city's elite, found that his calls were suddenly going unanswered. Contracts were mysteriously cancelled. Friends of decades now crossed the street to avoid him. Beatrice, who lived and breathed for her status as a socialite, was asked to step down from the boards of the 3 major charities she was involved with. Her wedding invitations were rescinded. Her name, once a fixture in the society pages, now only appeared in articles rehashing the scandal. My mother, according to a distant cousin who called to get the gossip, had not left the house in weeks, too humiliated to face the world she had tried so hard to conquer. They were trapped in their grand mansion, a prison of their own making, surrounded by the ghosts of a legacy they had tried to invent. They had worshipped at the altar of status, and in a single night, I had shown them that their God was a false one. Their punishment was to be left with nothing but their money and the bitter, undeniable truth of who they really were. While their world shrank, mine began to expand in ways I had never dared to imagine. The story of the genealogist's revenge had spread far beyond our city's society pages. It caught the attention of a high-profile literary agent in New York, who then shared it with a senior editor at a major publishing house. A week after the induction ceremony, I received an email with a subject line that made my heart stop. A book proposal from Penguin Random House. I met with the editor, a sharp, brilliant woman named Clara, via video call. I expected her to want a juicy, tell-all book about my toxic family. I was wrong. The family drama is compelling, Lena, she said, but what we're really interested in is you. You're a brilliant historical detective. The way you uncovered this story, your dedication to the primary sources, it's remarkable. We don't want you to write a gossip book. We want you to write a real history book. Tell the true, unvarnished story of your city's founding. Starting with the real Silas Thorne, they were offering me the one thing I had always wanted, to be seen and respected not as a daughter, not as a socialite, but as a historian. They offered me a generous advance and the full resources of their research department. My quiet, nerdy hobby was about to become my career. The following year was a whirlwind of purposeful, joyous work. I wrote my book, The Founder's Shadow. Greed, lies, and the true history of a city. It was a work of pure, unadulterated passion. I spent months traveling, digging through archives, uncovering forgotten stories, and weaving them into a narrative that was both historically rigorous and deeply compelling. The book was released to critical acclaim. Historians praised its meticulous research, and readers were captivated by the scandalous, true story of a city's dark origins. It became an unexpected national bestseller. I went on a book tour, gave lectures at universities, and was interviewed on national television, not as a victim of a cruel family, but as a respected author and a formidable historian. My glow-up wasn't about fancy clothes or a new house. It was about the profound, soul-deep satisfaction of my intellect and my passion finally being recognized and celebrated. I had found my voice, a voice my family had tried so hard to silence, and it turned out the world was actually eager to listen. A year after that fateful night at the Society Clubhouse, I was giving the keynote address at the National Genealogical Society's annual conference. I stood at a podium, looking out at a sea of faces who shared my passion, who understood the sacred duty of telling the stories of the past with honesty and integrity. My life was full. I had my work, I had the respect of my peers, and I had found a new kind of family, a community built on a shared love for the truth. That morning, a letter had arrived from my parents. It was a weak, rambling, self-pitying attempt at an apology, more focused on their own social misery than on any real remorse for what they had done to me. I read it, felt a fleeting pang of sadness for the parents I wished I'd had, and then filed it away. They were a part of my history, but they no longer had the power to define my present. As I looked out at the crowd, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought me here. My family's obsession with a false legacy had led me to uncover a true one. Their betrayal had been the catalyst for my liberation. As I prepared to speak, a final question settled in my mind. I exposed a dark secret that humiliated my family in order to set the historical record straight. Was this an act of historical integrity or a cold-hearted family betrayal? Let me know what you think in the comments.